If I asked you, what's the scariest thing in the Bible? Your first thought might be one of those biblically accurate angels, or maybe a demon-y devil of some sort. Decent answers. I think there is a real growing awareness online that the Old Testament isn't just full of buff humans with wings, but early biblical cosmic beings are so much more terrifying and mysterious than even the internet suggests. There are far greater divine terrors buried in this text. Creatures I can all but guarantee you've never heard of. Monsters that even the Almighty keeps in shadow. So we're gonna start with cherubs. Alright, the first thing to establish about biblical celestial entities is that they tend to have a hierarchy, becoming more unfathomable the higher you go, and cherubs are usually stuck at the bottom. But if you think of cherubs as little winged babies, this makes sense, and some informal interviews I had with other YouTube creators suggest that's still how most people see them.
Chubby, bumbling, stupid idiot babies doing cute things.
But do people associate cherubs with disembodied baby heads? I'd say responses were rather mixed.
What the kind of question is that? What are you...
I have never heard of this before.
So are they baby heads with wings?
Yes.
Okay, so these low-ranking terrors are called pooty heads, and are late medieval and Renaissance interpretations of cherubs from artists that seemingly decided you don't need the whole baby. Is this already a freakier concept than many of the biblical entities you hear about online?
I would find the floating baby head even more off-putting than just a mass of eyes.
Quite possibly, but cherubs or cherubim are of course not described in the Bible as floating baby heads, but they're not described as intact babies either. Biblical cherubim are actually hybrid monsters, a will-it-blend fusion of lions, eagles, oxen, and humans, closer to, your chimeras than to Cupid. And I'd like to remind you that this is the bottom of the incomprehensibility hierarchy. In the book of Genesis, cherubim serve as sentries patrolling the Garden of Eden. They're essentially guard dogs. Again, more like your sphinxes or your Cerberus, Cerberi, I don't know the plural, but the three-headed mutts, you know the ones. Okay, but again, what's with the cover-up? When and why did these nightmarish guardians become cute, winged babies? That's a question I need you to hold on to. The thing is, even biblical entities that people associate with being unfathomable tend to have another, even more unfathomable form hidden in the Old Testament. Moving up a rank, most people agreed that Seraphim is already a word that brings to mind crazy angelic imagery.
I imagine some kind of white, sharp curve. I imagine the golden ratio itself floating in the air.
And this is, in fact, accurate. Biblical Seraphim in Ezekiel have 6 wings.
2 wings up top, 2 wings in the middle, and 2 wings going down.
And only one of these pairs is used for flying. The other 2 are used as impromptu clothing to cover their eyes and feet, which sounds like a bit of a hassle.
Just wear shoes and sunglasses?
Though they definitely get points for style. But the point I'm trying to make is, there's a pre-existing understanding that seraphim are psychedelic figures. Yet again, in the original text, they get even stranger. Because when you hear the word seraphim, do you think of flying, fire-breathing reptiles?
Not even a little bit. That such a leading question, I feel.
Elsewhere in the Old Testament, the term seraphim sometimes instead refers to snakes with wings, and sometimes to just snakes. Seraphim are also associated with fire, which could be a metaphor for the burn of a serpent's venom, but might also be more literal. So again, what's with the double identity? Why are seraphim sometimes dudes with 6 wings, and sometimes almost more like biblical dragons? Because I was able to confirm that flying reptiles and angels are not commonly confused.
You're f***ing with me. That's not... I'm not going to say that's an angel.
I like how it's labeled. Oh yeah, I saw one of these, and this is figure 4.
There are no definitive answers here. The translation gets tricky. It's possible that the 6-winged seraphim were originally more reptilian, but it also seems like the flying snakes might indeed be a distinct form of the Almighty's servants. In her book, God's Monsters, Professor Esther J. Hamori writes that winged seraphim snakes are explicitly described as doing God's bidding. And I don't think you need to be a religious scholar to know that snakes in the Bible are usually not considered on the level. Does this mean that in addition to angels, God in the Old Testament had heavenly dragons in his posse? In which case, I mean, for one, that's so sick, but for another, well then, what happened to them? Why don't we ever hear about this kind of seraphim these days? Something's definitely going on here. To understand why the most mind-shattering biblical entities have been hidden from view, we need to address the elephant in the room. The elephant, in this case, being a rank of heavenly beings known as the Ophanim. You might not recognize the name, but you probably recognize the shape.
Is that the one that's the ring?
The wheels covered in eyes.
Yeah, the Ophanim might be the wheels.
Described in the Book of Ezekiel, these wheelie boys have become the go-to example online of the most bizarre angelic beings buried in the Bible. But there's even more to them than the internet suggests. First off, do they really look like wheels? Yes, actually.
Wheel-looking ass.
It was meant to almost describe like a living chariot.
The traditional thinking is that Ophanim are wheel-shaped because they're meant to essentially transport the throne of God, but their resulting, unique appearance has turned them into mini celebrities, the subject of shorts and tattoos and fan art. They even have their own borrowed catchphrase.
The accompanying phrase is always, "Be not afraid."
Be not afraid.
I would be terrified. I'd be like, my guy, you gotta work on your presentation because that is not comforting.
Now, some might object and say the Ophanim aren't actual angels, which is true. Indeed, it's about time I confess that cherubim and seraphim aren't technically angels either, even though the term biblically accurate angel is often applied to them by know-it-alls online.
The meme of the biblically accurate angel, I do think it might be tied to like a desire to be the smart person in the room to be like, well, actually.
Yet even if these lower-ranking entities aren't true angels, that doesn't mean they aren't angelic. They're still heavenly beings.
Early Christians would call them angels, just types of angels.
But okay, if the entities we've been exploring so far are almost angels, but not quite angels, what do true biblically accurate angels look like? And why does there seem to be so much cloak and dagger surrounding their classification? The truth is, although the appearance of angels has been willfully misrepresented for centuries, there isn't some grand conspiracy going on, or at least, not a conscious one. I think most people already have an image in their mind of the generic pop culture angel.
Buff angel with a sword?
Beautiful people playing a harp in the clouds.
Maybe with trumpets.
But much of this imagery doesn't actually come from the Bible, but from later medieval and Renaissance misinterpretations. Artists in these periods would take classical Greek and Roman imagery they were familiar with and just sort of graft it onto pre-existing biblical entities. To finally pull back the curtain a little, why do cherubim look like weird babies? Well, because the Roman figure of Cupid, originally the Greek Eros, looked like a weird baby. And generally speaking, people prefer babies to chimeras, so the babies stuck around. This is an example of syncretism, the combining of different religious aesthetics or schools of thought. And to say it's warped our understanding of angels is, frankly, an understatement. The most iconic image of an angel, a human with two wings, is literally never mentioned anywhere in the Bible.
Wait, whoa, that was such a lore drop.
Instead, when true angels take mortal form in the Old Testament, they just look like regular people. No wings at all. Now, this has led to some internet goers declaring that, well actually, biblically accurate angels always look like people, and yeah, that isn't accurate either, especially when it comes to the highest ranking archangels. When big named angels like Gabriel and Michael appear in cosmic form, they very much do not look like regular humans, variably described as having bodies of crystal, eyes that emanate fire, sometimes there's bursts of lightning and pure light. Basically, people who do see them are indeed very much afraid. But the sanded down, two-winged angel is more digestible, so that's what stuck around. And these days, generic angels are everywhere. They're in our commercials. They sell us like toilet paper and cream cheese.
You know, the Christmas tree topper angel, the McDonald's version of the angel.
While hiding the surreal kaleidoscope of heavenly entities behind a standardized form makes sense from a recognizability standpoint, to me, it also seems a little limiting. And I'm clearly not the only one who feels this way. The online popularity of biblically accurate angels, even if the term is somewhat misapplied, speaks to a real desire for more astonishing cosmic figures. Now, it is true that in some translations Gabriel has your classic wings, but not just 2 classic wings, more like 600. And while that might seem like a lot, such heavenly figures frankly needed to be utterly mind-shattering. They needed to possess truly incomprehensible power, considering the absolute nightmares they were up against. The hierarchy of heaven is only half the story. If you think biblically accurate angelic figures can be intimidating, biblically accurate monsters and demons are so much more Lovecraftian than cultural osmosis might lead you to believe. And while these forgotten terrors don't have a strict hierarchy, they're more connected than you might expect. And perhaps the most foundational monster of all is a creature that would feel right at home in the Cthulhu mythos. A beast whose very name has become synonymous with thalassic terror. When you think of the Leviathan, I'm sure certain imagery comes to mind.
The sea serpent.
Think of like the Kraken.
But bigger.
Large underwater lurking horror.
But the Leviathan in the Old Testament isn't just a big creature under the water. It's the big creature under the water. A monster so powerful it once tried to challenge creation itself. As described in the book of Job, instead of sending an angel, God had to directly fight the Leviathan multiple times in a brawl so epic it echoes across biblical canon.
So God fought a giant monster, like in Pacific Rim?
Yet the Leviathan is more than just a physical monster the Almighty had to go strike down. This creature seems to be a force of nature beyond mortal understanding. In another passage, God talks up the Leviathan, saying his eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. Out of his mouth go flaming torches. He has no equal upon the earth. Despite dwelling in the ocean, the Leviathan sounds like a celestial inferno, a serpent so fiery he makes the deep boil like a cauldron. Exactly what shape this underwater colossus takes isn't explicit, but there are hints.
Technically, in the Hebrew Bible, it's described as a multi-headed monster, so almost like a hydra.
The many-headed beast is also described as having scales. His back is rows of shields, his chest hard as rock, which to me almost calls to mind Tolkien-esque poetic descriptions of like Smaug from The Hobbit. The Leviathan's form being so couched in metaphor has indeed led many scholars to believe that, more than some literal kraken or sea serpent, the Leviathan is the idea of chaos being bested by order.
I also think of Leviathan as a metaphor for just something massive.
But even taken allegorically, the Leviathan feels like a suggestion of more ancient, incomprehensible powers lurking behind the veil, and it's only the tip of the iceberg. Though the Leviathan is the first eldritch chaos monster mentioned in the Bible, it's not the only one, or potentially even the largest one. The Old Testament also has fleeting references to Rahab, a primeval sea beast that God cut to pieces at the dawn of creation, bringing stability to existence. And this archaic monster doesn't work alone. The Book of Job also references the minions or helpers of Rahab, which to me calls to mind like the nameless things that gnaw at the foundations of the earth, again from Lord of the Rings, or some classic Lovecraft entity. Now, it's also possible that helpers of Rahab is just supposed to refer to sinners, like human sinners. Indeed, I should mention that plenty of translations downplay the severity of Old Testament primordial monsters. Even the original Leviathan is sometimes massively downgraded.
Some translations just translate it as like a crocodile, like a really big crocodile.
The same is true for the Leviathan's terrestrial equivalent, the Behemoth, which is often interpreted as not the kaiju-sized beast the name implies, but just a regular hippopotamus. But would a few rogue animals really be such a problem that the Almighty had to get involved? It's certainly more comforting to translate chaos entities like Rahab and its contemporaries as allegories or as familiar fauna, and when you only have a few veiled references to a monster, it's easier to temper it. But not every nightmare of the Old Testament has remained hidden in shadow. Perhaps no biblical monster has been the subject of more fascination after being dragged into the light than the enigmatic Nephilim. Though these mysterious giants are only briefly mentioned early in the Bible, their description frankly leaves infinite questions.
The craziest comes and goes in a flash. The Nephilim show up for like 2 sentences.
Like randomly throwing in, oh yeah, and then there were the Nephilim, they were big. Yeah? You gonna elaborate? Nah, it's fine.
But the little we do know about the Nephilim only makes them more fascinating. Like most traditional giants, they're, well, giant, obviously, yet it's possible they're really giant. One human observer says we were like grasshoppers next to them.
Wait, again, we got kaijus!
As for where these supersized people came from, well, Genesis hints that their parentage was rather heavenly.
Angels that appear in Genesis, some of the people there want to get to know them pretty closely, to put it lightly.
The Nephilim are described as a hybrid offspring of humans and the, quote, sons of God, which could mean angels or could mean lower-ranking heavenly beings, but regardless, this human-heaven pairing definitely seems off the books. And if you think humans and cosmic entities producing a group of giants together is so wild it demands further exploration, so did ancient people. Which is how we got the Book of Enoch, a non-canonical biblical DLC that massively elaborates on the whole Nephilim business.
I would consider First Enoch kind of being a fan fiction expansion of Genesis chapter 6.
The Book of Enoch is full of psychedelic creatures. In addition to the Nephilim, there's the Kolkidri, 12-winged flying serpents with crocodile heads, lion feet, and bodies that shimmer like the rainbow. There are also some phoenixes thrown in for good measure, but the Nephilim are the real stars of the show, though they aren't exactly behaving themselves. The giants in Enoch are beings of pure chaos, a threat to basically everyone.
They're monstrous. In the Book of Enoch, they ransack the earth and devour humanity.
Cause mischief. Or mischief plus.
Indeed, in some interpretations, Noah's flood was primarily sent just to deal with the Nephilim problem, although in other accounts a few Nephilim survived and continued to get busy with humans, which is actually where Goliath might have come from, like David and Goliath's Goliath.
How does the biology of that work?
Long story short, the heavenly beings that made these giants messed up big time, to the point where they seem like the greatest monsters of the text. Indeed, they might have been. Here at last, we're approaching the most iconic biblical nightmare, the idea of fallen angels / demons. Now, that / is doing a lot of heavy lifting, because the connection between fallen angels and demons is actually super complicated. In the Book of Enoch, the creators of the Nephilim are a group of angels gone bad called the Watchers, and while not well behaved, they're not quite classically demonic. But Enoch is its own can of worms. In the actual Bible, surely demons are those fallen angels that followed Satan. Do I need to introduce Satan? You know about Satan. And then his whole crew became demons, right? Maybe. There are references to angels who backed Satan and got thrown out of heaven for it, and also plenty of depictions of demons causing problems, but they might not be the exact same thing.
Angels can fall. I don't think that makes them demons, though.
Satan certainly has demons in his entourage, but he and his fallen angels might be set apart.
Artistically, they appear very differently. It's almost like orcs and elves in Lord of the Rings.
But no matter how you group them, demons and dark angels, as has been the theme of this video, get way stranger and scarier than pop culture might suggest. And nowhere are they on more mind-shattering display than in the very last biblical installment. There are many different interpretations of the biblical end of the world, but most agree upon a general miasma of monsters and demons. And in the popular consciousness, from this inferno rises one beast in particular.
I remember there being a beast, right? That's kind of the thing. There's the beast, there's the mark of the beast.
The idea of the beast, a big, scary, usually multi-headed personification of doomsday that may or may not be Satan, feels kind of like a given alongside fire and brimstone, which is why I was surprised to find that in most interpretations, there isn't actually just one beast, there's 3. One of the sea, one of the earth, and finally, the dragon, which is in fact Satan again. He's always showing up. Which of these beasts is like the beast and what the beast represents really varies. There's so many ways people take this highly symbolic section. However, 3 world-ending monsters definitely sets the tone for how much more off the chain this apocalypse is than one might expect. As part of this maelstrom, there's also a cameo appearance from the Locusts of Abaddon, a swarm of creatures described as resembling horses with crowned human faces, insect wings, lion's teeth, there's always a lion mixed in, and a tail with a scorpion stinger. There's also the demons of deception that look like big old frogs, or maybe just regular sized frogs, the language isn't super clear. And demons and monsters are still not the only invites to this nightmare.
There's monsters and there's horsemen. The 4 horsemen are different depending upon the time you read.
In terms of riders, the 4 horsemen are usually either war, death, plague, and famine, or war, death, conquest, and famine. And while neither set of 4 is ideal, what's even worse is that there's not just 4. After this first wave comes an army of 200 million additional horsemen, belching fire and smoke, which is a lot of horsemen, I can't lie to you. Angels and other divine beings usually show up as well to do their part. And considering how psychedelic they really look, altogether I'd imagine this would be quite the sight. Horrifying to witness, undoubtedly, but depending on how things would shake out, maybe kind of fascinating. I think there is a distinctive intrigue to the most unknowable, celestial, heavenly beings, despite all the fear and intimidation. The protectors and destroyers buried in lesser-known passages, the monsters the Almighty seems to cloak in shadow, are not coincidentally the ones we most want to drag into the light. The fragmentary descriptions we have of the highest-ranking figures feel like glimpses of a world we aren't supposed to fathom.
The higher you go, the more abstract they're supposed to be, like you're not supposed to know.
But it's fun to try and put the pieces together. I love the fact that there's all this surreal fan art trying to depict something as out there as a Seraphim or an Ophanim, and this impulse isn't new either. Ancient religious scholars would rank and classify the wildest heavenly figures seemingly just because it brought them joy.
There's these Christian theologians that try to come up with categories, almost like species of animals.
Everyone loved concentric circles back in the day.
There are always going to be people who want to learn more about the most cosmically head-spinning aspects of a text. Human fascination with the unfathomable truth behind simplified depictions is a timeless universal that even extends beyond angels. As online, the term biblically accurate has become a shorthand that no longer applies to just biblical figures.
Everything is a biblically accurate angel. The biblically accurate part has kind of run away. You could have like SpongeBob as a biblically accurate version of himself. You could have like biblically accurate Sans Undertale. Just look up biblically accurate anything in Google and you'll find a result.
I started writing this video with the idea of biblical monsters that got abandoned, but really it's us who've abandoned and transformed and forgotten these more psychedelic creatures, and maybe that was a mistake. Divine terrors might be frightening at a glance, but what is a burning wheel covered in eyes if not a friend you haven't met yet? Be not afraid? I don't think I would be. I mean, I would be at first, but, we'd talk it out. Considering how many biblical monsters I ended up exploring in this video, I didn't think there'd be any infernal rabbit holes left to go down. Yet as it turns out, perhaps the biggest demonic mystery of all is still unexplained. The question of who this guy is. Oh, you might think the answer is obvious. I did too. That's why I brushed past him in the main video. Pointy horns, red skin, that's gotta be the devil, right? But as it turns out, the Satan of the Bible actually looks completely different. So why is this dude everywhere, and who is he really? The truth behind the biblically accurate devil is so wild and confusing, it needed extra attention, which is why it's the focus of the latest episode of my new Curious Archive miniseries, Gods and Monsters. This is a show all about mythology that I've been super excited about making. There's already another full episode out about deep sea deities, Lovecraftian gods, abyssal serpents, and I think this new devil episode turned out even better. And you can watch them both right now only on that one streaming service you probably keep hearing about. Nebula is awesome. It's an ad-free platform for early, exclusive Curious Archive videos. I've got like a dozen others on top of my new Gods and Monsters show, and it's also home to early, exclusive videos from your other favorite creators. Tom Scott is back in the saddle and is releasing new videos on Nebula all the time, a week in advance. There's a reason why we all teamed up to make this streaming service. I couldn't have made Gods and Monsters without their support. And if you sign up for Nebula, you're directly helping channels like mine stay around. And because we're creator owned, we can also keep the price down. By signing up with the link on screen or in the description, you can get Nebula at 50% off, just $30 for the year or $2.50 a month. Becoming a part of Nebula will help me continue to make this new series the best that it can be. I've got some other super exciting episode ideas, and it will also help me continue to make stuff right here on YouTube for everyone to enjoy. If you're looking to support Curious Archive, there's no better way to do it. Also, if, like me, a monthly or yearly subscription model isn't your thing, you can instead use my link to get a full $200 off an unlimited lifetime of Nebula access for a one-time payment of $300 to get an account that will literally last forever. And, as I always like to remind people, if you'd like to share these videos, each Nebula subscriber automatically gets free, week-long guest passes so that friends and family can watch absolutely anything they want. You can also gift a month, a year, or even a lifetime of Nebula access using Nebula gift cards. Basically, there's a lot of options, but it all comes back to the same incredible deal of a platform allowing creators like myself to make shows like Gods and Monsters that we never could make on our own. So I hope you check it out. Again, as always, sign-up links are on screen and in the description. Enjoy the gods and enjoy the monsters. Also, huge shout out to all the creators who gave me their amazing answers to my angel questions. They absolutely made the video. Everyone should go check out their incredible channels, links are in the description. And, as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this entry, consider lending your support by liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification icon to stay up to date on all things curious. See you in the next video.